Her voice echoed through the boardroom speaker like a bullet dipped in perfume. "I'm proud to announce my patent filing for the Claricel, an energy leap that'll redefine power storage as we know it." The silence that followed wasn't admiration. It was confusion, hesitation, like everyone in the room suddenly tasted metal, because behind that closed door, at that polished oak table with Vellum Capital senior partners, she wasn't just pitching tech. She was walking into a lion's mouth lined with her own stolen teeth. Let me rewind. 3 hours earlier, I'd been eating cold chili from a plastic container in my pickup, parked 2 blocks from that same high-rise. I watched her stride in, red heels, glossy tablet, the same Prada bag she bought right after her breakthrough. I'd seen the receipt, forwarded from her assistant by mistake. Turns out geniuses also forget to log out of shared cloud folders. None of that mattered once she stepped into the conference room, not realizing who had been there first, because I'd already spent 2 weeks laying the minefield. Every document, every timestamp, every backdated email string and Slack export was already submitted to Vellum's legal team under an alias that traced back to my shell company, established 3 years ago in Delaware. They didn't need to know my face, they only needed the proof. I had enough to turn Clara's smug little house of cards into a napkin fire. I didn't do it for the money. I did it because the last thing my father said before he died, hooked to a morphine drip shaking from ALS, was, "Don't let her win again." He'd seen her destroy Mom's business in 2007. Hell, Clara was the reason we spent that winter heating the house with the oven and dry humbling canned ravioli. Now she wanted to put my name in her rearview mirror again. Not this time. I watched the elevator numbers tick up on my burner phone, tracking her floor. Then I opened Twitter. There it was. The scheduled post went live, breaking patent records show Clara M. Ellis's Claricel was filed 14 months after existing priority claims under New York-based Parallax Concepts, LLC. Sources confirm internal investigation underway. 100 likes in 20 seconds. Comments already rolling in. Back in the boardroom, someone coughed. Another partner cleared his throat, and Clara, bless her empty soul, kept presenting, laser pointer shaking slightly. She didn't know that across the glass wall in the observation room, I was watching everything through a one-way mirror. And her face hadn't drained yet, but it would. She kept talking, unaware that every syllable was walking her closer to a cliff. "And of course," she said, swiping to a slide labeled, "Projected Licensing Revenue. Our current negotiations with Tesla's R&D division suggest a 7-figure baseline within the first fiscal quarter." Wrong move. I saw Gordon Reese, Vellum's founder, lean back in his chair. One brow lifted, not at the slide, at the word "our," like he just tasted something off in his champagne. Meanwhile, across the table, Amelia Choi, IP lawyer Clara hadn't bothered Googling, tapped her pen once, then twice. She was the one who'd called me last week, the one who said, "We don't like being lied to. If this invention is yours, prove it." I sent her the raw data, video footage, memo, the receipt from the first 3D print shop I used in 2019, even the coffee-stained notebook page where I sketched the early voltage stack diagram next to a phone number labeled Rachel from Taco Bell. Don't drunk dial. She called me back an hour later. We'll handle the rest. So now, in real time, I got to watch the lawyer study Clara like a lab rat wearing lipstick, the kind of silence where you can hear a reputation unravel. She clicked to the next slide, technical architecture, and that's when Reese finally cut her off. "This is impressive," he said slowly, almost kindly, like a teacher addressing a toddler who's drawn a crude dinosaur and called it Mommy. "But I do have a question." Clara smiled like she was ready to be crowned. "Of course. Do you know who owns Parallax Concepts?" Reese asked. She blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Parallax Concepts LLC," he repeated, reaching under the table and placing a folder in front of him. "Firm holding the prior art patents on this technology. It seems your filing came well after their original claim. In fact, your abstract appears to be, shall we say, suspiciously aligned." You could feel it happen, that shift, like the oxygen got thinner. Her knuckles widened against the edge of the table. "There must be a mistake," she said, voice suddenly tight, throat clearing itself. I've worked on this for—" Amelia cut in gently. "Clara, do you not recognize any of the circuitry, the modeling language, even the naming conventions? You presented with a file called B12 sinyl.falone.pptx. That's not even your naming structure. That's how he labels his files. Clara froze. It was the first time she didn't have a retort. She opened her mouth, then shut it, blinked again. That's when Reese turned to the glass wall and smiled. He knew I was behind the mirror. I didn't move, didn't smile back. I just watched, waited, because her face hadn't drained yet. Not fully. But the next 30 seconds, they'd make her wish she'd never learned my name. She tried to recover, like a drunk slipping on ice and pretending it was a dance move. I don't know what this is, Clara said, laughing too sharply. Parallax concepts? I've never heard of them. This must be some kind of setup. I mean, anyone can file a... Reese's smile didn't reach his eyes. You submitted an invention built on layered graphene logic clusters that exactly match what's already been filed by Parallax, down to the thermal regulation coefficients. Even the typos are identical. Amelia slid a printed page across the table. Here's your patent abstract, she said. Then another, and here's theirs. You copy-pasted, Clara. You didn't even change the misspelled word capacitor. Wrote it as capac. The room went dead quiet. For the first time in her life, Clara didn't reach for charm, for spin, for her practiced eyebrow raise or carefully manicured laugh. She just sat there, hollow, like a mannequin that finally realized it was naked under floodlights. What is this? She whispered. Reese opened the folder, pulled out a thin stack of photos, my garage in Dayton, my notes, my solder-stained workbench, my selfie holding the first ugliest prototype. They were time-stamped, watermarked, registered. The smoking gun wasn't just warm, it was still glowing. Then he laid down the final card, a signed IP transfer agreement between me and Vellum, dated 1 week prior. The rights were already theirs. See, Clara, Reese said, calm as a funeral, you tried to sell us something we already bought from the actual creator. And that was the moment it hit. Her lips parted slightly. Breath caught. Skin went the color of printer paper left out in the rain. She reached slowly for the glass of water in front of her, hand trembling, missed it, and knocked it over instead. Nobody moved to help. Amelia dabbed her files dry with a tissue and said sweetly, We'll have to pause your proposal. I'm afraid there may be legal implications. We've already contacted the USPTO regarding the overlapping claims. Clara stood like she might faint or bolt. Reese added one last nail, quiet and sharp. And when your name gets flagged in the patent fraud database, you may want to rethink any future startup dreams. Investors don't love that kind of thing. She looked around the room, maybe hoping someone would say, No, this is a mistake. You're amazing, Clara. But no one spoke. Just a slow shuffle of papers, a cough, the click of someone's pen. Reality was vacuum sealing around her like shrink wrap, and then she saw me through the glass. I didn't wave, just stared. Same way you watch a snake realize it swallowed a scorpion. Her lips formed one word. Not loud, not panicked, just stunned. You? I nodded once and then walked away. Because this wasn't the end. This was the ignition point, and Clara hadn't even read the terms of what she'd really just triggered. The fallout didn't start with a bang, it started with a ping. Clara must have barely made it to the elevator before her phone lit up, first from Amelia's formal cease and desist, then from the USPTO notification alerting her to a pending investigation. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst came from within her own firm, Midwest Genesis Ventures, when their general counsel looped her into a furious email thread titled simply Patent Fraud Exposure, immediate review needed by 3:15 p.m. Her LinkedIn was still up. By 3:17, the inventor, innovator, disruptor line was gone, replaced with nothing, blank. And by 4:00 p.m., I was already in the next meeting, different floor, different suit, same building, shaking hands with the actual decision-makers of Vellum Capital. Except this time, I had the seat at the head of the table, not her. You should know, Reese said after the handshakes. We called the Department of Energy. They're interested, especially after we shared the revised specs. He tapped the portfolio in front of him. Want to lawyer up? But in a good way this time. I nodded, still buzzing on adrenaline and bitter satisfaction, though I kept it cool. What I didn't say, what I didn't need to say, was that this wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. My invention, my name, my father's promise honored. But Clara wasn't done squirming. That evening, she did what cornered narcissists do best, damage control wrapped in delusion. She called me, blocked number, 2 seconds of static. Her voice, that same weaponized syrup I'd grown up dodging. "Look, we need to talk." I let her sit in the silence for 5 full seconds before answering. "No. You need to shut up and listen for once in your life." She gasped, like that shocked her, like she still believed I'd roll over because she had the same last name as me. "Do you know what you've done?" she hissed. "You've embarrassed me. I could have brought you in on this. You didn't have to go behind my back." I laughed. It came out ugly, jagged. "You stole from me. You stole the only thing I've built in 10 years. You used my work like it was your accessory, and now you want to play victim." She shifted gears instantly. "Fine. Maybe I pushed the envelope, but think about the optics. You look vindictive. I look like a pioneer who got blindsided. You want your name in headlines next to billion-dollar battery or next to family drama. You think this is about optics?" I said, voice dropping. "Clara, I don't care if the whole world sees your mugshot next to a damn deepfake of me juggling gerbils. You tried to erase me. Now you get to watch what happens when the eraser backfires." She started to say something, maybe another lie, maybe some warped apology, but I hung up and forwarded the call recording to Vellum's legal team just in case. By midnight, things happened. The first article broke on Tech Chronicle, Midwest innovator accused of patent fraud by Anonymous LLC, investors pull out. Clara's calendar cleared itself. Meetings vanished, so did her badge access to her own office. And still, this wasn't the finale. Because the truth, she hadn't just tried to steal a battery. She'd accidentally poked a sleeping beast I'd kept hidden in the basement for years. Something with deeper patents, broader reach, one very inconvenient NDA she didn't know existed. And that's what was going to finish her. Not me, not a press leak, but what was already signed by her own hand without her even realizing it. 3 years ago, Clara asked me to help her with her startup paperwork, said it was just boilerplate stuff for her seed investors, and she needed someone good with legalese. Back then, I was naive, still healing from divorce, living in the garage, spending my nights debugging voltage surge issues with duct-taped prototypes and lukewarm beer. Clara swooped in like family often does when they smell potential. Smile sharp, voice honeyed, eyes hungry. She gave me 20 pages of incorporation forms, investor affidavits, and a generic-looking consulting agreement titled IP Review Memo Draft. I skimmed it, made a few suggestions, even drafted an improved clause for future asset ownership split. She laughed. "I knew you'd polish it. You always loved the details." What she didn't know, what I never told her, was that the document I saved on my machine that night wasn't just her draft anymore. It was my revision, time-stamped, notarized, and backed up to a blockchain-secured repository. And one clause I'd accidentally left in during the copy edit said this: "All technology developed or advised upon by consultant under this agreement, whether materially altered or otherwise, shall remain the intellectual property of consultant." That consultant? Me. Meaning every pitch deck, schematic, wiring diagram, and slide she ever touched after that contract, all retroactively belonged to me, including the polished renderings she used to woo Tesla, including the demo cell she displayed at the Chicago Tech Expo, which, fun fact, I designed the housing for. When her former COO finally emailed me in a blind panic, subject line, "Is this real?" all I did was send him a screenshot of that clause, highlighted in blood red. Clara had used my shell company to sign a consulting agreement that quietly made me the silent owner of all IP her firm developed from 2021 to mid-2023. And her COO, bless his panicked little heart, replied within 4 minutes, "We're so sorry. Please advise on next steps. Can we license the rights?" Clara didn't even know it yet. While she was probably rage-refreshing her Twitter mentions and crafting a carefully vague "I've always believed in innovation and transparency" PR statement, her own team was preparing to cut me a royalty check just to keep the lights on. That night, I met with my lawyer. I told her, "Don't sue yet, not until she tries to get cute." And right on cue, Clara tried to get cute. The next morning, she posted a video, soft lighting, gray sweater, no makeup, her relatable founder persona. "I want to speak directly to my community," she began, voice trembling. I may have made missteps. I was passionate, maybe too passionate, but I never intended to hurt anyone, especially not my own family. I hope we can heal. She ended with a quote, Maya Angelou maybe, or Brene Brown. I didn't hear it. I was too busy uploading the full audit trail of her IP misappropriation to the next law firm on my list. Because her video wasn't a peace offering. It was a preemptive move. She knew the real storm was coming. She just didn't know where it would hit first. Spoiler, it wasn't going to be court. It wasn't going to be tech media. It was going to be the investors. The same men and women who hated surprises and already smelled risk like wolves smell blood. One of them was already scheduled to speak with me privately in a room where her name was suddenly radioactive. The meeting wasn't in some boardroom with ergonomic chairs and imported espresso. It was in the back of a golf club outside Cincinnati, cigar smoke in the air, a bourbon decanter on the table, and 5 men who'd never needed LinkedIn because their last names opened doors. They called themselves the Foundry Syndicate. Clara used to brag about being their first female-backed founder, like she'd cracked the code with charisma and spreadsheets. But now her name wasn't on the invite list. Mine was. "I'll be blunt," said Malcolm Wright, the syndicate's senior lead. Thick fingers, Rolex older than me, eyes like dead granite. "You're telling us Clara never owned the IP?" I didn't answer with words. I slid a slim black binder across the table. Inside, her signature on the consulting agreement, timestamps, every diagram she pitched, the metadata trail of her edits on files I originated. I'd even included an internal Slack exchange where she asked a junior engineer, "Can you clean up my brother's prototype stuff? Make it pop." Wright flipped through the evidence slowly, like a butcher evaluating the weight of a carcass. "Jesus Christ," one of the others muttered. "She gave us fake ownership rights," Malcolm said flatly. "Invalidates the entire Series A structure. We're exposed." He didn't look panicked. He looked insulted, the kind of insult that precedes annihilation. "Here's my offer," I said, voice calm but surgical. "I license back the IP to your portfolio company on my terms. You get stability, I get credit, and Clara gets erased." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "You don't want damages?" "Oh, I'll get those too," I said. "But not from you, from her." He smiled then, not kindly, provingly. "Send the licensing terms," he said. "Clara's out. If she so much as files a tweet, we'll make sure she's bankrupt by Thanksgiving." And just like that, her kingdom, built on glitter, theft, and a last name she assumed would always shield her, was auctioned off before she even knew it was for sale. By the time she called me again, voice cracked and half sobbing, I was already on a flight to New York for the formal signing. "Please," she said, "I get it. You made your point. But you can't just destroy me. I'm your sister." "You were," I replied, "but then you tried to bury me alive." Okay, then let's, I don't know, fix it. Tell the press it was a misunderstanding. See, you gave me permission. That's not how this ends. You want money? I'll wire it. A cut of the Tesla deal." I smiled bitterly, eyes on the runway through the oval window. "There is no Tesla deal, Clara. You pitched them my battery. They're talking to me now." She didn't respond for a moment. I could hear her breathing hard. Then she whispered it like a dying curse. "You don't forgive." "No," I said. "I outlive." And then I hung up for the last time. At 3:12 p.m., the Foundry Syndicate issued a press release. Midwest Genesis Ventures will be restructuring under new leadership following significant internal irregularities. Effective immediately, all technology developed will be licensed via Parallax Concepts. No mention of Clara, no mention of family. She was already being erased, file by file, meeting by meeting, until her legacy looked like a typo in a footnote. And yet, the real humiliation, it wasn't public. It was what waited in her inbox, the final paper trail she hadn't seen, the one thing she signed blindly and what it meant for everything she still thought she owned. It was buried in a PDF she'd skimmed 2 years ago, right before the ink dried on her second round of funding. Back then, she was too busy sipping champagne on a rented yacht to read the full terms. Page 47, Clause 6C, titled in bold IP license reversion trigger, ethics clause breach. It stated plain as day that if any member of the executive board was found to have knowingly misrepresented ownership of core technology, all IP rights licensed to the company would automatically revert back to the original creator. Permanently, irrevocably, no arbitration, no appeal. Who wrote that clause? Me, under a pseudonym as James R. Hathaway, an alias I used back when I ghost wrote technical contracts for startups to pay my rent. Clara never questioned why her lawyer used a new consultant for speed and clarity. never questioned the bonus check she approved to Jay Hathaway after the contract passed investor review. So when that clause got triggered, quietly, clinically, her entire empire didn't just crack, it disappeared. I watched it happen through back-end access I still had, thanks to another one of her oversights, the permissions she never revoked. The admin panel, where I saw her documents vanish one by one. December Tesla demo render, IP license structure final, Clara Cell launch event presentation. She tried logging in at 6:41 a.m., again at 6:43, again at 6:47. Then her password changed, because now it was mine. But the final blow wasn't digital. It was in the box, a small, carefully wrapped package I had couriered to her apartment. Inside, a flash drive, a hard copy of the reversion clause, one of the earliest prototypes of the Claricel etched with my initials in the copper coil, along with a post-it note, "You should have stuck to stealing boyfriends. Stealing legacies is harder." That night, I saw the footage. Someone leaked her meltdown at the Vellum lobby, screaming at a poor intern, demanding answers, dressed in a coat she hadn't buttoned, right shoe in her hand. Security escorted her out while she shouted about betrayal and revenge and legal mistakes. Looked like a ghost wearing Clara's skin. By midnight, I'd signed the Tesla licensing deal under my name. The same name she'd spent years trying to erase. The same one on every document now. The same one tech blogs were scrambling to Google, finally curious about the man behind the miracle cell. And what did I feel? Not triumph, not glory, just quiet. Like the silence in a lab after a circuit finally holds. No sparks, no screaming, just the confirmation that yes, it works, and the lights are on. But it still wasn't over, because I had one final reveal. One last card she didn't even know she'd handed me, and I was saving it for the moment she crawled back out, trying to rebrand herself, repitch her image, rewrite her story, because there was video, and she forgot exactly where she'd filmed it. The footage was old, grainy, vertical, uploaded to a burner Vimeo she probably thought she deleted. It was Clara in a WeWork conference room, champagne flute in hand, fresh off her first victory lap after that TechCrunch article named her a disruptive innovator to watch. A few VCs had circled her, nosing around like flies on frosting. She was drunk on attention, looser than usual. That's when she hit record. She was speaking to someone off camera, probably a junior dev or one of her underpaid interns, and in that perfect, careless Clara way, she said, "Oh, please. My brother's a genius, sure, but he couldn't sell water in a desert. I'm the brand. I'll take what works and spin it. That's the game. You think Steve Jobs built the iPhone? No. He sold it. I'll be that, just hotter." She laughed, ugly and raw. "By the time he figures out what I'm doing, I'll already be on stage with Elon." That line, that one line. I downloaded the video, burned 3 encrypted copies, and let it sit until now. Clara's comeback began exactly 41 days after her implosion, a half-hearted Medium post titled, "What I've Learned from Failure, A Founder's Journey Through Redemption." The post was slick, ghost-written, padded with quotes from Sun Tzu and Toni Morrison, and signed in cursive blue with "Always Building, Clara." Comments were limited, shares were artificially inflated, but it was clear she was testing the waters, so I gave her a ripple, an anonymous submission to TechLeaks. The video, time-stamped, verified. The site ran it under the headline, "Exclusive, Disgraced Founder Mocked Brother Before IP Scandal. I'll take what works and spin it." It exploded within hours. Startups that still had her on advisory boards dropped her like a rattlesnake with a marketing degree. Her Redemption podcast tour got canceled. Speaking gig at Women in Tech NYC pulled. Agent gone. Brand deals torched. She tried to issue a clarification, deleted it, then ghosted. The story went viral not because she lied, but because she said it on camera, so smug, so unapologetic. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a confession in cocktail lighting, and as for me, I stood on the TED stage 6 months later, holding up that same prototype she'd mocked. "My sister once told someone I couldn't sell water in a desert," I said to the crowd. "So I built a well, then sold the map." The audience erupted, but I didn't grin, because the win wasn't the applause. It was the silence that followed. She wasn't in the crowd, wasn't in the industry, wasn't anywhere. Her name had vanished from the footnotes of innovation, and mine had taken its place.